Hi, I'm Rory Greener from XR Today, bringing you the latest in news and conversation from the extended reality space. Today, we are chatting about the relationship between GenAI and XR, as well as industry drivers of emerging workplace technologies. Joining me to talk about the subject is Nick Roseth, the founder of Explore Design and the Minneapolis AR/VR Association chapter president. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nick. And Nick, I heard you have been at an event recently, a fairly good one in terms of industry drivers and enterprise representation of XR. Could you please give us a little bit of insight into that before we kick off our main questions?
Thanks, Rory. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be here and talk about the intersection of XR and AI. I was just at the IVRHA International VR Healthcare Association conference down in Tampa, and it was really exciting. Lot of great startups, lots of great companies going on there. There's a ton of interest in the healthcare space with XR. I recently talked to someone who's formerly at Unity, and he was talking about how healthcare is one of the big bright spots in the XR industry, and there's just so much going on there. So it was really exciting to see all of the people, all of the companies, all of the ideas that were going around there, and it seems like there's a lot of momentum.
Fantastic. And I imagine that was a place where you really noticed some industry drivers of XR technology in enterprise. And what were some of the standout, or in your experience more broadly, what is some of the most largest industry drivers of XR at the moment?
Yeah, in healthcare, I think there's a lot to be said with just some of the visual aspects of what XR can help with. In the healthcare space, I kind of break it down into three key areas. Assistive technology is kind of a great term of how XR and AI could be considered. And this would be anything that can help surgeons, for instance, in an operating theater or some of the planning for surgical aspects. Another is the training and education. So that is definitely a big driver in the healthcare space, in that you can create and customize any situation in a virtual environment. So this is very helpful for training doctors on specific procedures, or helping patients kind of understand what's going to happen, in a post surgical situation. And then finally is the patient experience. And so this is where you're actually able to get patients and participants into some sort of an immersive experience, whether it's AR or VR, to be able to really deliver a form of treatment, whether that's physical in nature, like PT, for example. There was a company at IVRA talking about physical therapy, or even mental health. That's another big area where XR, I think, is really kind of hitting its stride.
Brilliant. And also, I know you've got a bit of background as well in Gen AI and applying Gen AI in the workplace too. How does Gen AI fall into the workplace, and perhaps what areas is Gen AI helping in? You obviously noted there you have the sort of patient-facing solutions as well as the healthcare professional-facing solutions. So in all, how is Gen AI helping both those sides?
Yeah, I think generative AI is super powerful in a number of different contexts within healthcare or the enterprise in general. And we're still pretty early. I'll put that caveat out there that ChatGPT came out like a year and a half ago and has really kind of fundamentally changed the world, along with Dolly and Midjourney, and now we have Sora with generative video. So I think there's a ton of different spaces in which generative AI is going to change workflows. It is both fairly straightforward and incredibly complex. The biggest thing, I think, is going to be to optimize two key areas that I think that Gen AI is going to help us with. Is one, in optimization of existing processes. So things that we know, something might take 10 hours right now, Gen AI could help get that down to 45 minutes or 2 minutes. So this is existing workflows. The other area I think Gen AI is going to really allow us to really scale ideas and creativity. And so if you think about, right now you might have a few people that are in charge of coming up with new ideas to explore, something in the biological field. And right now, if you're limited to a certain amount of ideas that you can generate between those couple of people. But with generative AI, its ability to create thousands, if not millions, of solutions in a fairly short amount of time, I think is pretty powerful, and is already we're already seeing a lot of examples of where that's helping. So both in the optimization aspects, and then in the kind of scalability of ideas and creativity. And I think that it'll be some time, it takes some time to actually connect and build into existing workflows. That's where a lot of that challenge is. And we're still somewhat in the beginning stages of being able to safely use all of that, private data with these platforms. So like in healthcare, for instance, there's a lot of existing stuff that has to be kind of maneuvered in terms of being able to do things securely within HIPAA environments. But so there's a lot of solutions out there that are coming out very rapidly that are allowing us to do that, one of which is called retrieval augmented generation in generative AI, and that essentially allows you to plug in a private data set into OpenAI's ChatGPT. So the solution and the kind of the number of different approaches to generative AI is exploding.
And I guess within that as well, you're able to approach fairly niche use cases, especially I imagine in healthcare and other areas like that, enterprise use cases, that you will be able to, that professionals, working niche use cases, working niche perhaps, working on niche medical instances with patients, what have you, will be able to leverage Gen AI to get a newfound amount of solutions as well. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this comes back to really the one of the key tricks with Gen AI is to look at all of the existing workflows that you have and all of the existing solutions and the problems. So there's kind of two ways to go about that. One is to just look at an existing problem and then look at, generative AI as one more automation tool. There was a really good article posted in Harvard Business Review recently that essentially said your enterprise is not ready for Gen AI. It's not structured for Gen AI. And the purpose of that article is to say you have to take a step all the way back, not just look at your existing workflows, but look at your entire approach to problem solving, in that AI is kind of a new paradigm in which we have to look at things. So, there's two different approaches. There's two different sets of challenges in that. So like one, for instance, one area that I think Gen AI could be super helpful is just in transcription of, patient conversations. So I know that there are companies out there working on that as an example, where essentially just hit record during a discussion, and then generative AI is able to transcribe that conversation, and then out of that, store the notes, and then possibly help facilitate some of the, evaluation, pathology, that kind of stuff. So, those things kind of fit into an existing workflow and has to connect to existing systems and platforms. Whereas a completely, brand new or kind of blue ocean strategy would be to look at a specific problem, regardless of what you guys have in place right now, and say, okay, now if we were to build this thing from scratch, how would we approach that? So there's two different kind of ways of looking at things, and I think both are going to be important of, integrating generative AI into existing platforms, but also looking at problems in a completely different way.
And especially with XR and Gen AI, they are sort of very, maybe not data driven, but they use a lot of associated data within whatever professional environment that may be. So perhaps from your experience, or what are your thoughts on perhaps best approaches, best practices for leveraging XR and Gen AI in data sensitive sectors, already demanding sectors? And, healthcare, for example, has such a legacy of using, quite old technology to quite new technology. So there must be kind of a lot of big considerations there. Again, especially because Gen AI, as you've already mentioned, is using a lot of sensitive data, especially in these environments, and XR equally uses a lot of sensitive spatial data. So just again, what's the best approaches when you're approaching these sectors that you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean that gets pretty complicated when it comes to looking at all of the different angles. So you have, the data security. You've got some of the ethical aspects of how generative AI can and should be used. And then you have kind of things from a technical perspective is where's this data stored? I think that one of the challenges that people have is to kind of go all the way back to the fundamentals, and that you need to have the right data in the right place in order to really be able to do something with and leverage these types of technology. So in spatial computing, we have lots of cameras now. So there's a ton of data coming off of cameras, and that data needs to make its way to a facility or place where we can actually do something with that data. And so I think that, the securing a pipeline and proper storage of data is a big aspect, but also needs to tie back to a strategy of, now that we have this data, what can we do with it? And then how does that tie, particularly in healthcare, how does that tie back to clinically proven methodologies of what to do with that data? So I think again, to try to simplify it back to some of the major pieces, is to have a strategy around, what are we doing about data privacy? You've got HIPAA compliance in that space. What are we doing about some of the ethical ramifications of leveraging, generative AI in existing practices? And then what are the technical aspects of having, the appropriate data in the right place? What are the implications of trying to connect that into existing systems like, electronic medical records? Generative AI might be able to do a ton of awesome things, but if you can't connect it into an EHR, then you've got some challenges in terms of being able to try to scale that technology. So all of those are important aspects, I think, when approaching this. Even up to and including some of the actual headsets themselves. In healthcare and other industries, data privacy is a big deal. And when you have a couple of social media companies that own these, that certainly becomes a problem for them when you have a potential data privacy issue there. And this is where I think new players in the market, particularly Apple, I think there's a big potential for those kinds of more consumer electronics based business models, not social media business models, that have an opportunity with some of these more data sensitive industries to be able to come in and certainly be able to say, we will absolutely not touch your data is yours. But those are some of the things that I think are considerations when looking at how are we going to leverage this. It's not as simple as kind of plug and play. We know the technology can do it. It's in industries where that is a big deal. Certainly have to kind of go back to how do you integrate that into the existing design of the industry. And I think also that the industry needs to really take a step back and reevaluate what it's doing to leverage these and incorporate them and reanalyze those platforms or those rules to upgrade them to 2024, because that is certainly one of the potential areas that are going to hold back some awesome solutions that can push any industry forward, is to really make sure that we're revising some of these outdated philosophies around some of these things so that we can kind of push us all forward.
Brilliant. And one of the sort of main factors, or one of the main relationships here we're also talking about is XR and GenAI. And these are technologies, as you've already mentioned, that are early in their development. But despite that, you're hearing firms such as Microsoft state that perhaps the two are more interconnected than we realise. And you're obviously seeing GenAI being used in XR development suites. It's already finding a home within the XR sort of device and software marketplace. But from your perspective, what does that relationship look like, and will there be a future where XR and GenAI work together?
Yeah, I mean, my area of interest is definitely this overlap of XR and AI, because I think there's so much, they're so integrated at this point. I mean, if you look at the Apple Vision Pro, and how much AI is used in that, particularly machine learning and its ability to like recognize your hands and your eyes. The eye tracking, for instance, is pretty amazing. And there's definitely separation. AI is used too broad of a term these days, particularly because of ChatGPT and Midjourney and some of those. But there is just more of a traditional umbrella of AI that includes things like natural language processing and machine learning that are integrated into these devices top to bottom already. And I think that relationship is super important for things like being able to recognize like face recognition or hands and how they interact with the environment, or even things like being able to identify and recognize instruments in operating theater, for example. So I think that overlap of AI and XR is a super important one, but a lot of that is already integrated with machine learning tools. I think the generative AI piece specifically opens up a whole kind of new world of possibilities in the capability of creating content. Two of the big drivers of scalability in the XR space comes down to hardware. You need headsets in people's hands, and then the content. And XR content has traditionally been fairly expensive because of 3D content gets expensive to create and to maintain. And this is where I think that generative AI can be particularly useful in the production of some of that content. So I think Gen AI is going to help reduce some of the costs associated with creating that content. And I think once that content is able to scale, where you're able to create newer experiences and leverage Gen AI, whether that's through being able to use Gen AI to write code or to create scripts. Or I think eventually here, at some point, we'll definitely see, generative 3D content. We're already starting to see some of the early stages of what that can do. And I think once you get to this relationship of natural language processing and the ability for generative AI to, create 3D content, it's not too far out to think where you're wearing your XR device and you're able to talk, and it's able to create a 3D environment and space around you in real time in some form or another. So I think that it's an important step in being able to scale, the two things I go back to earlier, which is one, to optimize existing workflows in terms of being able to create content and optimize those workflows, and then also the scalability of ideas and personalization. And I think that personalization aspect is super important when it comes to things like personalizing healthcare or personalizing experiences, whether at the consumer level or at the enterprise level. And I think that overlap of XR and its ability to immerse somebody in an experience, into a workflow, and then generative AI's capabilities really as an assistive technology in some form or another, I think that is going to be super powerful, and we're already starting to see some of what that looks like.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. That was incredibly insightful, every one of your comments. I really appreciate your time today, Nick.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cool, brilliant. That's it from myself. You can get more XR news by subscribing to our XR Today news channel and by following our social pages. I'm Rory Green from XR Today. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers, Nick.